Am I in focus? All right, what's up guys? So this G7X has been getting so much flack. I've seen a lot of YouTubers, including myself, who have complained about the focus. My last video I released was getting some love, but some hate just because I think of the focus issues. I stand behind the fact I really think it's a great vlogging camera, but we're headed to go meet up with one of my good buddies to get a beer, so I figured on the way there we could talk about a few things. Talk about ultimately what I don't like about this camera. Because I already did such a positive review, I want to talk about some of the downsides, not just the focus system. So I really think they can address this through firmware, but ultimately let's find out. Last but not least, so what we're using is the Rode Video Micro. If you like the audio, think it sounds good. It was really windy today, so I didn't want to use the onboard mic. I want to try out a few different setups. I'll show you what that setup looks like shortly. Let's get into it. All right, so right now we're walking. You guys can see I'm out of focus. If I actually press the shutter button here, it likes to sometimes. There it goes. I don't know if that actually made a difference, if that was just whatever. When you're not actually recording, it definitely does. I'm gonna have to show you this for my EOS R, which is in the backpack here shortly, once we do more in-depth focus tests. But it does seem like pressing the shutter button may have some impact ultimately on the focus. Another thing I want to call out is when you look at the price point of this camera, 750 bucks, right? Look at the RX0. A lot of people love that camera. Some hate it. I actually returned mine because it had single autofocus, but that only had single autofocus. So that is something you can work with a camera like this, even if you know the autofocus is bad. Again, I think there's firmware, hopefully, that can fix some of this, but you have similar price point cameras that are out there that don't even have continuous. So the fact that it does eventually work, yeah, I'm probably giving it too much credit because it should work a lot better than it does right now, but at least it's there. It is something that you have at your disposal. The only other positive thing I'll say in this video, and then we'll talk about all the other negatives, is that the picture quality looks really good, especially from a camera like this at this price point. I had a lot of comments that basically said that, and a lot of feedback from my friends that saw the videos that really expressed how good the picture looks when it does grab focus. The biggest problem there is that it's not always grabbing focus. The box is on my face the entire time is the worst part. All right, so starting off with downsides, I want to talk about the audio because there were a few things that stood out, which probably through software could get better, and some are definitely hardware aspects. So the onboard mic was actually pretty good. It was better than I expected. To me, it sounded better than the RX100, but you're probably going to want to use external audio. That's why they've included the external audio jack. I'm over that it doesn't have a hot shoe. Yeah, it's inconvenient, but they have enough adapters now. You can really work around that. That's what I'm doing right now. The problems I found, you can't adjust the gain levels unless you go into the deep settings. So on the EOS R, on some of those other cameras, you can actually change things right from the quick menu settings. So if I need to adjust for wind, change my mics out, I want to talk at a different level, I get into a quiet room, I can actually do that very easily. With this, it has a little bit deeper. You have to go into the real settings to change that. I don't know why they don't just have it in the same quick settings like they do on the other cameras. So very easy software update, but I'm hoping they address that in the future. The second thing is the actual hardware, the audio jack that you plug into it, because I've had with my lav mics, it doesn't seat so well and it ends up falling out. So in my last video, I actually had a few scenes I had to completely cut because you just heard loud clicking and the mic wasn't seated properly. I think this is going to be more prevalent on things like the Sennheisers or the even DAW lav that I have, because it has that kind of recessed jack where you can actually screw it into certain audio receivers. That kind of pulls the plug out just enough to where it doesn't seat properly in this. If they would have had kind of a concave design or something where it's a little more recessed, that would have seated better, and then more ultimately it would have stayed in. So if you're using lav mics, especially the ones with the little metal adapters and screw-ons, be aware it might not be seated properly and you're always going to want to check it. All right, so one last comment on audio is that the way the audio level works is it kind of starts as high as it can and then goes down from there. So the first part of your scene, a lot of times, if you're using the onboard mic or just auto audio levels, it's gonna end up kind of clipping and then figure out where it needs to be. I wish it started more in a middle setting and then went up or down appropriately, because you can always boost, but if something's clipping, it's not gonna sound good even if you bring the levels down later on. All right, so for those of you that like to color grade, for those of you that want to get a higher dynamic range, you're not going to be able to out of this camera. It has no C-Log. I don't know why. Sony offers all these picture profiles. It's something I've gotten used to, something I really appreciate. C-Log is amazing. It's probably my favorite log profile I've used, even comparing it to the Sony cameras, but there's no log on here. So only things you can do are adjust kind of the color settings, which are, you know, whatever, vivid, creative, those weird different aspects, but you can't actually shoot in any type of log format where you're going to get a higher dynamic range out of the camera. All right, so another thing to be aware of with the 4K on here, although it looks great, I do like the 4K out of it, it works good with the stabilization, is the exposure. You've got to use manual exposure to even find settings to turn it on to 4K. So you can't actually go in here and have like aperture priority mode on, for example, which is something I do like to use, especially with these point and shoot cameras. You don't necessarily need to use the manual settings. Maybe you want to, but it's nice to always have the option to be able to choose between which mode. Sony's don't limit these. They have no option, you know, which mode you're shooting in. You can shoot in the same frame rates, same speeds, other than something like 120 frames per second where you're gonna have to shoot in 1080. So kind of annoying, but I do get it, I guess. That's kind of the tweaks you get with Canon sometimes. C-Log on the EOS R is only gonna work in manual mode, so I think it's processor speed, but another thing to be aware of, if you want 4K, you're choosing your shutter speed, you're choosing your aperture. Luckily, auto ISO does work in that mode. That's the one saving grace, is that some light to dark scenes will actually still look good because the ISO can change dynamically. All right, so the things we learn as we use stuff, apparently overheating is another issue on here. As I was just shooting the scenes right now, it's not that hot out. The sun is out. I guess it's shining on the camera, but the camera overheated. So I can say the other day I recorded a 30-minute straight clip in 4K inside the cabin, so in a somewhat controlled environment, and there were no issues. But as it is right now, I can see the warning sign going off. Literally just the sun shining on me, that's about it. It's not that hot. I think it's 75 right now, and this thing keeps overheating. So that's gonna be an issue too, apparently. I've never seen that on the Sonys. I know it does happen, but I've shot in environments like this and I've never had it happen. So RX100's starting to look a little bit better. I'm just gonna go ahead and apologize now. Not only did I get lost trying to find this bar, but I realized half these scenes are out of focus as well. Daily Pint. All I know is this guy knows his beer, so I'm gonna go ahead and trust him. I think we found it. That was honestly one of the best times I've had in a long time. So just really good friend. I haven't worked with him in a long time, and he always has great advice. Just a great person. If you're ever in the area, Daily Pint, big thumbs up. The Scotch selection was unreal. They had a lot of good drinks, a lot of good beers. Don't have food, but they let you order food. So we got some food from Grubhub on there, but really, really big thumbs up, and I just had a really good time. So glad I came out. Big recommendation. Let's get back to the review. So right now I want to call out the low light performance because ultimately I wasn't too impressed. It's not terrible, but at the end of the day, it's not what I would expect from a 1-inch sensor. Photos, videos, both of these hold true. I really was hoping for something a little bit brighter. What happens is the grain is not bad. It's very controlled, but it only lets you go up to 3200 ISO in these modes. So it's not that high. It's not gonna let you really push it. I'd rather be able to push the image, get some graininess, but still let in more light. Right now it's about 805. It looks pretty good on the camera from what I can see, but ultimately I do wish it could let in a little bit more light. I also think this is gonna play into the focus modes and how much it lets you do with focus. So not the king of low light. So next up, let's talk about recording time. We saw the overheating issues I had earlier. Now that the sun's down and it's a little bit colder, I think ultimately it's not bad, but it does have the 30-minute time cap. So we recorded this the other day in the cabin. After 30 minutes, it's gonna stop recording. That being said, it doesn't chapter. So you do not have to deal with chaptering issues. If you were aware of that or thought about that, there's no chapter, it's one full file, so you don't have to deal with that. That is a thumbs up. The 30-minute time, it doesn't play in a lot, but I feel like with time lapses, it does come into play, and there are people out there that do care about that. So definitely wanna call that out. 30 minutes is the cap, it's gonna shut off. And quite frankly, if it's hot out, it's gonna shut off well before that, as we've seen. So that's gonna do it for this video, guys. Honestly, after all the negative things I have to say, I agree with all of them. The focus is a serious issue. I just still like this camera. The pictures where it does get in focus, you just gotta point, wait, and shoot like the title says. Picture looks good, audio sounds good. That's really all I want. So yes, there's some quirks, but there are with most cameras. So I still recommend it. I still like it. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, it's been a pleasure. Subscribe if you haven't already. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video. I'll see you next time.